Here we are, kids. Another day, another week. It's not another month, but it is Wednesday, September 14th, 2022. Before we get started with today's episode, which I'm very excited about, just a tiny bit of housekeeping. Next week, there will unfortunately be no episode of the show, and that is because I am working on a documentary with a friend of mine who's directing it, coming out to Portland. I'll be working on that for 4 days, so Monday through Thursday next week. I am out of commission. I'm doing things I love, and that's great. Brandon, great to have you here. As always, the chat is open for questions, and I'm going to bring on my friend and our guest for today for a conversation. Here he is. Rob Garrett, what's happening, man?
Hey, good to see you, as always.
You too. Yes, thank you. We broke bread again recently at a original. It wasn't the original Pancake House because the original one is actually in Portland, but we were in Salem, and here we are. And I'm really happy that you were able to do this with me. So welcome.
It was good to see people face to face. Like that's such a. I know it's like it's become trite to say that these days, but it really is amazing. Anytime you can see someone in person.
I know. It is, and it's nice to be out there seeing people in production, less restrictive and feeling in a lot of ways more creative. So that's a great thing, I think, for all of us and for the community as a whole. People who are here in the chat and who are part of the show every week, and just a hey to 360 grad, David, Victor. These are all regulars who come in every week. And nice. Brandon, your comments great, and good to have Victor here again. He sort of disappeared for a while working on these giant vehicles and things, and there you go. Yeah. So
testing 1 2, testing 1 2.
I think it's all right. Well, maybe I'll turn mine down 360 grad, but we'll speak loudly. But I can definitely hear you.
I can talk louder.
All right, cool. So conversations, we haven't done one of these in a long time, and the whole idea is to get insight from industry professionals, friends of mine, colleagues, and just talk about the state of things, but also have an understanding of where the people that I'm talking to come from, what their history is, and sort of how they got started on things. So if you wouldn't mind, Rob, if we can just start with how you got involved in this whole mess creatively, that would be awesome.
I came from the print world. I discovered the world of desktop publishing accidentally in the early 90s, probably 92, I think it was, when I started using tools like PageMaker and Photoshop, and kind of worked my way around Los Angeles, going to different print shops and stuff, and helping people with their desktop publishing needs, literally door to door back in those days, and parlayed all of that into a job at a entertainment advertising agency where I discovered After Effects in 1995, and kind of hit the ground running in the motion design world, which was really fledgling at those points. And discovered 3D animation again by accident at the same place, almost in the same year. So I kind of learned 3D and 2D side by side, all in those mid-90s. And then I was working as an art director at Fox Kids Network, and discovered Cinema 4D, sort of by accident there as well, and was switched from using Electric Image over to Cinema 4D, and never looked back from that. And somewhere around 2001, I think it was, or 2, discovered Final Cut Pro, and I had already done a little bit of editing. It's hard to get access to Avid systems back in those days, and Final Cut was such a groundbreaking. One of the things that was so groundbreaking about it was the fact that anybody could get access to it. And I was working at a little shop that was also selling video editing systems at the time, and I was working on a job that was a thing for Disney Channel, and it was an all 3D animation project that had to get laid back to tape, and basically we were going to pay an editor to come in and just lay all the stuff back to tape that I had done, and all the versioning and everything, and that was already built. And I was like, hey, you know what, I could probably do that myself. And a very long night later, I had the tape ready to go, and that was kind of the start of the video editing career. And so I started doing a lot of post production side by side with that sort of thing, where I was doing both the motion design and then would get called in to do the video editing, and sometimes I would get called in to just do the video editing on stuff. And so I have clients from back in the day that only knew me as a 3D motion person, and then I have other clients that only knew me as a video post person that didn't know I could do animation and stuff as well. So I kind of was very much a jack of all trades, and started teaching at Art Center in Pasadena, California, in 2003. And that was really kind of my formal entry into the teaching world. I'd always been teaching stuff, teaching people Photoshop and After Effects and Cinema 4D, kind of piano lesson style at their homes. And this was my first time teaching in front of actual people, and it was a really cool new world for me. And that was really the where I kind of discovered my true passion, which has always been teaching and sharing my knowledge, and which led me eventually to a company called lynda.com, which is no more, and it turned into LinkedIn Learning, which is where I met Jem Schofield.
Yeah, which is crazy that we didn't meet each other until then, because our paths were sort of parallel, so similar in a lot of ways. The path that you went into when it comes to 3D was not the path I took, but I started in the graphic design world. The transition from from graphic design companies and dealing with desktop publishing, and then similarly to you, I latched on to things related to post-production and creating things that were computer-based, that was already happening in graphic design. And so for me, it was a path of web development that then moved to DVD authoring, which then led to motion graphics and then Final Cut. I was the black sheep for a long time. I was the one that was, I was the DVD guy, and everybody else was certified or teaching or using Final Cut Pro. And I'd ask companies, do you need to learn how to use DVD Studio Pro? And they're like, no, we're fine. And then it's like a switch got turned on, and if anybody knows about the educational world, besides lynda.com, in the real world, it was Future Media Concepts. They were the ones that had training centers all over the country, and they had they also did the big conferences. They still do NAB and stuff like that, and I still teach for them. But I called all their training centers from Boston all the way down to Miami, and I was like, I'm a certified DVD Studio Pro person. And they said, we've got nothing. And then 3 months later, the phone just wouldn't stop ringing, because all of these companies needed to learn how to author their own DVDs, whether they were making exercise videos. There were government contracts in DC, did a lot of things for military, school districts. And then I also transitioned, of course, at a similar time to you, a little bit earlier, into education, and that is a passion of mine as well, and eventually led me to Lynda. Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's funny that you talk about your background in DVD Studio Pro, because when you and I met, I only ever knew you as a shooter, a person working with cameras all the time. And that was always how I've known you. And it's always interesting to hear, how did you make the switch from post to production? Yeah,
it was really weird, because it was also like you. It was the one side didn't know I did this, and the other side didn't know I did that. And so I started producing in the late 98 or so. So I started doing video production then. But I wasn't a production person from the standpoint of using equipment. I didn't consider myself a DP. I wasn't a shooter then. But I was put into a producer role. And that producer role was something that I wasn't good at the time. I'm a lot better at it now. But at the same time, I was doing all of this other post-production stuff. And what happened was, oddly enough, in a strange way, I had taught ESL, English as a Second Language, when I was in high school. And I loved teaching. And then I never taught ever again. And then A decade later, a friend of mine was opening an Apple authorized training center on the East Coast in the New York, New Jersey area. And I was like, hey, I'm already using DVD Studio Pro. Maybe I could, teach some classes. And this is DVD Studio Pro 1, which was very different. It was, I think that was Maestro. And then there was the second one. And that was a totally different. They bought another company and they made it DVD Studio Pro 2. So I stayed on the bandwagon with all of that. And I actually continued to do production the whole time, and then started learning production and started learning how to light and all of those things. But from about 2001 until 2008, I pretty much exclusively taught post. So I was teaching DVD Studio Pro, then Motion, then Soundtrack Pro, and then eventually Final Cut Pro. And I became relatively early on part of Apple's Train the Trainer program. So I got trained that way, and then I became a train the trainer. So I would teach others to become certified trainers in Apple's, at the time, Final Cut Studio. But then the writing was on the wall, and around 2008, when everything changed for Apple, no more trade shows, everything else, I was already working with Future Media Concepts, and I said, I'm sick of teaching post. How about I start doing some production workshops for you? Because at that point, I was starting to really feel confident. And there was a magic period there, of course, as you know, and when the 5D Mark II came out and that whole thing exploded. So it really became the time where production-based training was in huge demand. And so that's kind of how I made my transition to production, even though I had already been in it for a decade. But from a training standpoint.
Yeah, it's interesting, the education world. So you bring up FMC, which is an amazing place, and that was sort of how I found you, going to NAB so many times in a row, and I would always go to the FMC conference, their selection of classes that they would have there. And when I started working at lynda.com, so I started working at lynda.com in it's either 10 or 11. I always get foggy on that. But I did my first course for them in 2009, and then took over the content manager role in that 2010-11 range. And that was shortly after that, I was building the library for video production and motion design for lynda.com and recruiting instructors, and that was where you and I met. And I had gone to NAB that year and stalked the hell out of the FMC lineup and was like, oh, that looks like a really good instructor. I think I'll give him a call. And which was the magic of that role. It was such a cool thing to go out and leverage all the amazing connections that I had in the world, and just to reach out to people and go, hey, would you like to share your knowledge? And then work with those amazing people to bring that knowledge into the lynda.com library was really a super fun role. And eventually lynda.com got bought by LinkedIn, and it was a really good transition, and I've transitioned out of that organization now, and I spent about 11 years. So to make a very long story short, when I started with Lynda, I was a freelance video editor, art director, animator, 3D generalist, basically whatever I needed to do to pay the bills. And also teaching at Art Center in Pasadena. And then the opportunity came up to teach to work at lynda.com. And I slowly started to pull back from all of that freelance work, and essentially cut myself off from the creative side. Not intentionally, it's just, and if anybody on the stream has worked at a big company before, that, as the company grows, and when I started with lynda.com, there were less than 100 employees. And by the end of that first year, we were up to like 300 employees. And then by the end of the second year, we were up to 600 employees.
Wow.
And as companies grow, your role expands, and the things they expect you to do expand, and, everything changes. And as that change happened, I kept getting pulled further and further away from the creative life that I loved. And it took me all the way up until May of this year when I finally jumped ship to get back into the creative life. And that's kind of where I'm at now, as I'm going back and rekindling all of that old muscle memory that I had from back in the day. And it's going to sound fruity, but I'm on a journey to build a creative life for myself. And that's, I don't know what that means. I'm kind of defining it in real time, and I write about it on my blog. And I haven't been sharing any of my projects yet. I kind of have set off on this journey with a lot of intention. I spent a bunch of months in therapy, and also just kind of planning out my exit from corporate life, and to figure out how to get back into creativity. And part of that was coming up with a fairly detailed plan that has a bunch of phases. And I'm kind of right on the cusp of phase 2 right now. Phase 1 was really about rebuilding all of my creative habits. How do I spent the last 10 years doing email and spreadsheets and talking all day. The job that I had was remote, and all of the recruiting that I did was this way through video chat. So I was doing that for years and years and years before COVID. And so when I decided to come out again, to come out into the world again, my goal was to rebuild those creative muscles. And I've decided in phase 1 is just about me making projects and not really sharing any of the stuff that I'm making on social media, because I just want to focus on creating things and building projects. And then slowly but surely this fall is when I'm going to transition to phase 2, where I'm going to start sharing the things that I'm working on and building, and doing some tutorials and things. And part of the research that I'm doing now involves like figuring out where the gaps are. There is a shitload more people now sharing their knowledge on the internet, and it's beautiful. But it also means there's tons of competition, and it's also a very crowded market. And so you want to figure out, if you're going to share your knowledge, if you want to share your knowledge, you need to figure out your own voice, and then find your lane and figure out where, what are the things that you enjoy talking about. And part of that is me, stalking all the amazing people that are already sharing their knowledge online, and figuring out, okay, what are they talking about, and how does my point of view differ from theirs, and how can I, massage that into something that's coherent for people going forward. So that's kind of my goal. That was a very long-winded way of saying that I'm, I don't know what the hell I'm doing right now.
You're trying to figure it out, but you are figuring it out. I mean, it's amazing how fast the journey happens. I think, when you look back and you say, okay, this was 11 years, and then
Yes.
and 11 years with a company that changed dramatically. I look at golden years, and it's like this time I was with Apple was sort of that was the golden years of that training program at Apple. You had the golden years at lynda.com, and then it transitioned to LinkedIn, which then was bought by Microsoft. So then it's really a Microsoft company. And, the original goals of what lynda.com were are totally different. I mean, it's still about education, but what is it about education for? And it was very, very clearly about educating creative professionals from day one, and that changed. And that's fine that things change. But there's some interesting things that you brought up. I do want to mention to everybody who's here on the show, the chat is open, so put an at the C47 if you have a question for myself, or especially for Rob. I have added links in the description for the show so that you can go to Rob's site, bendingpixels.com. You'll see those articles and those blogs that he's writing, and then also some links to some things that we may be talking about in the next half hour or so related to where this industry may be going as a whole. But I thought one of the things that you said that was interesting to me, Rob, was that you're doing things creatively right now, but you're not sharing them. And one of the things that I find that happens to me, because I'm coming out of a 2-year period where I was doing work, not exclusively, but almost exclusively for one client. And it was fantastic. We were creating great educational content. It was for the children's market. I loved doing it. I would love to do more of it. I think I will. I think they're a great company. But I'm sort of now in this position where I'm kind of back to the 2 years ago, version of myself, where you're you're reaching out to people, you're looking for things that you want to do. At the same time, I feel like the landscape of creators, people who are creating content and sharing information, has changed dramatically, and that there is probably a self-created pressure on myself in terms of being able to create like really great content. And it's not flashy content. I know that's not my lane. I'm an educator and I'm about teaching people how to do things. But there's so many people doing things that are such high production value and so entertaining. It's figuring out where that lane is and feeling at times not intimidated in terms of what my skill sets are and what I can do professionally for clients, but like spending the time, I'm not a sponsored channel, spending the time to create great educational content around the things that I want to help people learn about. But this is a big pressure, I think. But it's probably self-imposed.
Wait, that self-imposition is really important to call out, because so much of what we do today can turn performative really quick, right? And one of the conscious decisions I made in this transitional period was not to share stuff online, because I didn't want to get I didn't want to get distracted. I knew that if creating amazing personal projects and then sharing about them is those are two really full-time jobs, right? And you're trying to mush them together into one action-packed day. And what I really consciously decided to do was say, I'm not gonna worry about sharing anything now. I'm really gonna focus on getting back into making things again, and then slowly figure that out, because I didn't want to fall into that trap of I got to post something today, or you think about the imposter syndrome and FOMO and all those other things that social media creates. We as creative people, and I'm the folks watching as well probably feel this too. Like, as creative people, we want to make sure that we're putting ourselves out there in the best possible light. Right. But that creates all this extra pressure, right? And if you're trying to be creative, the last thing you need to do is put pressure on yourself. And so I said, okay, I'm slicing the air. Damn it, I am not going to worry about posting anything right now. I do my blog still, but that's a different side of my brain, because I'm writing. Yeah. And I always do a crazy, if folks go to my blog page, bendingpixels.com/blog, you'll see like all of the banner images that I do. And I always, take special care in those because they're kind of fun. But that's again a different part of me. When I'm for the right now, I'm really diving all in on 3D animation again and getting back into Cinema 4D. And it's the goal is to really again rebuild myself, because this is going to sound a little bit arrogant. I don't mean it to sound that way. It's really embarrassing for me. I have literally forgotten more stuff than a lot of people know about all of these subjects, and that's because I haven't been doing it, and I need to get back to doing so that I can reestablish my credibility again, because I have a whole generation of people that have forgotten about me. I think about all the people that took my Cinema 4D classes on lynda.com. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people have learned Cinema 4D through those classes. Yeah. And but those are old. So that was like 8-9 years ago, and none of that stuff is valid anymore, and it's like time for me to rebuild myself. And so that pressure of trying to rebuild myself and post at the same time was like, I don't need that shit.
Yeah it's a weird place to be, and one of the things that I will say, which has to do with you're in a position right now where you're taking some time to figure that out. Some people are not. If you're in your 20s, just create shit. Like that's the time. I mean, if there's anybody who's in their 20s, maybe your early 30s, just do it, because that's the opportunity. I mean, obviously there are people who take a life path that's different than sort of like what's expected or what you should do, and they don't have 2 or 3 kids and the 1 dog and 2 cars and stuff. But most people are kind of in that position, and they've taken on a tremendous amount of responsibility. but I would say if you're at that age, just go for it. At the same time, it's whether you're 25, 35, 45, 55. Right now, I think there's a lot of people, especially because of the last couple of years, who are looking at a work-life balance in a different way than they did before. I do want to just bring up a comment here from Philip, 360 grad. So he says, I'm way less knowledgeable than you guys, but still got asked regularly about tips as I am raised to always be better than others, which made me afraid of sharing my knowledge. But I learned at the end it's an additional challenge of becoming better and humbles me as well. Also, then I learned from from stuff that I once thought, I get the gist of it. I mean, for me as an educator, when I started, I look back on it and I realize how little I actually knew. And I still know little. But part of being a teacher is it's a desire and a passion to learn something and then want to impart that knowledge. I can do that much more effectively than I could 10, 15 years ago. It's very different the way I teach now. Whereas before I would learn something and I would feel compelled to have to pile on everything I've learned and teach all of that to everybody every single time I got in the classroom. And now I'm more selective and I evaluate the landscape of what people probably do know and don't know, which is a lot more now than they used to. But 360, it's really important if you are interested in teaching people to do it, because it's the best way for you to learn. Because I found that my best learning happened when I started teaching, because there are times where you're going to be a deer in the headlights. The best thing you can do, and I've slipped a couple of times, but the best thing you can do is be honest about what you do and don't know. And if you don't know the answer to a question, go find the answer, even if it's after you're being asked to teach something. But don't pretend you know it. But it will push you hard to become better at what you do. Yeah.
Rick in the chat, he has the desire to learn something, make money on it, and tell no one. It's funny that you say that, though, Rick. When I got started in the industry, that was the mentality. And there's been a complete 180 shift in the world where there are no more secrets anymore. When I first started doing this, first of all, the internet was basically email and bulletin board servers and AOL, and that was it, right? Yeah. And so there was no, I remember the first time I saw a video transmitted across the internet, and I was like, I was working on a promo package for a sales kit, actually, for a show. I think it was the Judge Judy show at the time, at an awesome little company in Burbank that I was working at. But when I saw that video, it was a weird thing that happened in my head. I saw the entire industry about to shift on its head. Now, obviously, I didn't see it well enough because I'm not rich. I didn't figure out how to capitalize on all that shit. Right. But I could see, like I said, at the time, VHSs were king, right? At that time frame, and it's Rick Zichty. Hey, Rick, I'm right behind you,
Rick.
Dude. And
he's very Rick. Yeah, but these are Rick comments for sure. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I'm right behind. I'm only 4 years behind you, dude. But the whole idea of sharing information has changed so much, because when I first started out, everybody was holding everything close to the vest because that was your edge, and you were going to compete in all this stuff. And as the entire industry grew and changed and evolved over time, people began to realize that their knowledge about tools wasn't nearly as important as their creativity and how they thought about solving a problem for a client. The tools change. That's the one guarantee. Like right now, we're in this crazy industry shift where in the 3D side of things, Blender is coming on strong, and Cinema 4D and Maya and 3D Studio Max and Houdini are kind of looking at holding their skirts up going, oh dear, what the heck is going on with this Blender crowd coming in. And We're about to go through a sea change in terms of how people use tools, and the question becomes: are you the tool or are you an artist? And you always have to, no matter what tool you're using, you have to decide how are you going to use that tool creatively going forward. And that's the one guarantee. Like, I can look back on my career and look at all the little sea changes that have happened, whether or not it was from electric image into the Cinema 4D world, or the Avid into the Final Cut Pro world, or the DVD Studio Pro into the nobody does DVDs at all anymore. Like, think about that. And something that you're doing could get pulled out from under you, and whatever the metaverse ends up becoming, the one thing that we should all remember is that the metaverse will be built on people first. Like, all these technologies that are these things that they call metaverse, whether it's blockchain, NFT, VR, AR, on and on and on. There is no actual metaverse thing yet, right? But eventually, whatever the metaverse turns into, it won't happen unless it serves people. Yeah. And when it starts to serve people, that's when it'll turn into a thing.
Right. Totally. And the thing that I say, and I've said hundreds, if not thousands of times, is there's never going to be less screens in the world. And so it's a very healthy time to be somebody who's creating content, whether that's one part of the content or you're responsible for the overall thing that's being created. When the transition happened from Avid going, to an online suite that was costing $500 to $750 an hour, and somebody sat in their golden throne, to, Video Toaster, then Media 100, then Final Cut Pro, Premiere Pro, and that thing. The reason people started sharing education is because the way we worked was different as well. I mean, Final Cut was the first true community in the industry where you were hiring editors who were working from home. And that was in 2001, 2002. You were hiring an editor who was working out of an apartment in Brooklyn or in, Pasadena or wherever they were based. And that was the beginning of the sea change of the industry. And the difference was those people needed education and they needed community. And so community can be a huge part of what helps us, and not in a networking, I'm handing out a business card so I want you to hire me way, but just the mentality is totally different now.
But James Chisholm in the chat called that out. He's working staff somewhere, and he's actually getting measured on how much he shares and interacts with other people. And
that's so crazy.
You talk about that's a huge shift in mentality, and it actually benefits you, James. I would ask you the question: how much have you learned by sharing that knowledge with the people that you work with? Like, that's the, I always go, if anybody who knew me from the early days at Art Center when I first started teaching there in 2003, I owe you a beer. Because my classes were terrible back then, and I was learning as I was going. I was learning how to teach and learning how to communicate and share, and it was a struggle. But I was learning so much as I was going. I always that was one of the things I loved about it, was I got so much. At the end of each term, I would sit back and go and just look at all the stuff that I'd learned along the way, and it was staggering. My skill level just grew by leaps and bounds through all that time. And it's what is that thing, the 10,000 hours or whatever, it's part of those hours. I mean, the things that I learned were tremendous. All right, let's see if the screen sharing works. Yeah, it does. Okay. So there's Bending Pixels. So we'll just start this conversation a little bit, or continue this whole thing about work-life balance. And one of the links that you have in there is just sort of this soft life mentality and what that is. I think I'd like to talk to you about that and get your take on it, and then talk about it in terms of how it might relate to us and, the things that we're doing. And I'm just trying to switch us over here. Let me just get you back to... okay.
It's not cooperating. I used the wrong keyboard.
Rick, you can't get a 6-pack, dude.
Yeah,
Come to Bend, Oregon. I'll buy you a 6-pack.
Yeah, I owe so many people. I might owe people bottles of scotches from
Yeah.
some of my early training. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So full disclosure, I am not a millennial and I don't play one on TV, but I am the father of a millennial.
yes,
And the thing that's so in 2020 when COVID hit, and the world was going to hell in a handbasket, and we didn't know what the heck was happening. We've all been in this crazy fight or flight mode for so long now, and sitting down and reevaluating our life and going, WTF? All the things that I've been told about how I was supposed to live are falling apart in front of me. And I need to figure out a better way to live my life. And, that article that you pulled up on screen about the soft life is really passive aggressive. It's like, and there's another term that's really common right now, which is quiet quitting. So we went from the Great Resignation. Yeah. We went from the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffle, to quiet quitting, and now the soft life. And that's the business community who desperately needs people to come and work for them, trying to come to grips with humanity's need to live and not work. And whether or not that is, we have this crazy system where we need money to do things, right? And so that forces us to have these things called jobs. And there's all these things that we have to do to try and survive. But along the way, we're trying to figure out how to have the best life we can. Right. And when I look at that article and they're calling out millennials specifically in that, but who doesn't want to have a good life? Who wants to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week for something that no one's going to remember in a year? Like, that is not how we as... So, a great story, just a real short one. Right before I took the job at lynda.com, literally the weekend, I'd been made the job offer on a Friday. And I was working freelance at this little shop that's owned by my friend Sergio at the time. And we were working on a promo for Disney Channel. And we worked 72 hours in a row without sleeping. 72 hours in a row without sleeping to get that project to the finish line, making changes all along the way, rendering, re-editing, digging for footage, recutting, audio design, blah, blah, all the way through to the finished project. And that was something that aired for like a week. And it broke me. I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is not a healthy way to live. And I was like, I don't care where this job role is going to leave me. I need to pull the ripcord and get out of this lifestyle, because it is going to kill me if I do that again. To quote Apu from The Simpsons, I thought I was a hummingbird by the end. Like, it was insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, again, why is that, why would I want that for my child? Like, if you're the father or parent of a millennial, if you're a millennial watching this now, live first, then work. You have to do something, right, to keep the bills on, but always figure out, how do you want to live?
Yeah, I tell my kids, and they're definitely at ages now where they should be thinking about it. But there's a societal expectation that you do things a certain way, and it's not just the dentist and the doctor expectation. It's, you have to go to college, you have to do this, and if you don't do these things, you're not going to get a good paying job. You're not going to get a good paying job. You're not going to get a good paying job, and if you don't have that, you can't pay your rent. You can't buy your food, and I'm sorry to say, as miserable as it gets sometimes. I love what I do for a living. There's transitions that happen where I have to reevaluate or change what I'm doing, or find out how I continue to increase to a better work-life balance. You move from California to Oregon. I move from New Jersey to Oregon. Not that Oregon's the place where you go get a better quality of life. Hey, Wilder. But it's really important that you're happy doing what you do in your life. Mm-hmm. And some people don't have that choice, but I think if you have enough passion and you're interest in something is the seed, and then
Yes.
you work to educate yourself on it, you can become better and better at something. And at a certain point, you'll look back and you'll say, I actually know something about this and I can contribute to something. And if you have a good work ethic and if you're not a pain in the ass, then you're going to find other people to work with. And it's word of mouth in this industry. That's how we work. We don't work with people who are great at what they do. We work with people who are passionate about what they do and can get a great product. And it's a bonus if they're amazing. You know what I mean? There's like the seed. But I don't want to work with people who are assholes. I want to work with people who I enjoy working with, which is a great thing.
Yeah.
So it's a tough one, but yeah.
It's funny, Walter, said it's never too late to change things up, which is 100% true. That was sort of the seed of my big ass change that I'm going through right now, which is, and I'm, through we talked about this before, Jem, which was, through a combination of, number one, good fortune, but also some solid decision making at the time. I was over the last 11 years able to put myself into a position where I was able to take this time for myself. And yes, I am robbing Peter to pay Paul from a retirement standpoint, but
Sure.
I'm at a place where I can take this pause for a moment and recollect myself, and then get back to work. And that's a really important thing to call out. All the decisions that you make all the time add up to who you are and who you're going to be. And
Right.
It's really important. One of the decisions my wife and I made when we got we landed this amazing opportunity at lynda.com. I'd been in the freelance business treading water for, like a lot of folks, for a long time. And, if anybody here works freelance in a big city like Los Angeles, where I was living at the time, that it is, you are living just enough for the city, to quote Stevie Wonder. It's a hard thing to do. And when we got this gig at lynda.com, I said out loud in a sentence, we are not going to live beyond our means. We're going to live below our means and start shoveling money into the bank as much as possible. And and that was the thing. That decision right from the start, not to get a new car, not to trade my house for a larger house payment. Like, all of those things add up, and it's crazy. So, if you're able to have a little bit of restraint over the long run, that will benefit you and put you in a place of success. You combine those sound decisions with a little bit of good fortune, because we all have that good fortune, right? What's the fortune favors the prepared, or luck favors the prepared? However that sentence goes. If you're working consistently, and if you're ready for opportunity when it presents itself, then you'll be ready for it, and you can parlay that opportunity into something good if you're paying attention, and that's the hard part.
Yeah, totally. And I just want to say that I do want to acknowledge, for anybody who watches this, it's not a one size fits all, and there's an acknowledgement, especially for Rob and I think we speak from an age where we're seeing a lot of our colleagues who have been, not self-employed, unlike me for most of my life, which is really hard sometimes, but that are in company, positions. They get hired by a company for a job, and when you hit a certain age, there's a tendency, and this is not new to the last few years, but there's this word unqualified that gets thrown around, right? Sometimes it's overqualified, which is very passive aggressive in its own way, because somebody is, let's say, over the age of 55 or over the age of 60. They have tremendous experience, and if they're still working in a company like Apple or Google or something like that, they're the OGs. They're the people who everybody looks up to. They're the Yodas and everything else. But there's also a lot of those people who never became part of Apple or Google, who have all of that knowledge, and they're 60 and they know more than everybody knows, but because of who is hiring people in a company or corporation, they're underqualified or overqualified or whatever they're saying, but really it's just a really not nice way of saying you're older than we want for somebody who works for us. So I just want to acknowledge that we know it's not easy for a lot of people too. We happen to be people who like, you know, I'm not saying it'll never happen, but the idea of me working for a company as a full-time person is not something that's desirable to me. That makes me unhappy as a person. To work with companies and create and do things is something that I'm very happy to do. But it's regardless of how much money, because I always say that money for me is the byproduct. I need it, but it's not the product of what I do. And for some people, it totally is, and I respect that. If that's your game and you want to be a stockbroker or you want to be a wealth management person, then money might be the game. But for me, it's a byproduct of creativity. But just try to do things that you're happy doing. And it's going to be really hard sometimes. Yeah.
The important thing is whatever you're doing, to do it with intention, to mean what you're going to do, to say out loud, here's what I'm trying to accomplish, as opposed to, and this is a lesson that I didn't really comprehend until very recently in life. You know, I look back on my career and it's like bumper cars. Basically, I was, going from one opportunity or crisis to another. I look back on it and it all adds up to a career, right? But in the moment I was like, oh shit, I just lost this job. I need to go find something else. And, it's that kind of thing. And it's those, whether it was an opportunity or a crisis or some weird combination of the two, it was at the moment it was happening, I didn't fully understand the impact that those decisions would have downstream. Yeah. And it's only with the lens of hindsight that I'm able to go, oh yeah, okay, this led me to here, and that led me to there, and this led me to here, and I look back and it adds up to this thing called a career. And the thing I'm looking at now for the rest of my life, and Rick, I'm looking at you, because I'm literally right behind you in the time stream. And one of the things I've noticed as I get older is that the world of creativity, in the corporate world especially, is not exactly favorable to older workers. And I decided, as I started to notice this at LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is an amazing company, but the vast majority of people that work there are under 30. It's just crazy. It's actually shocking, like how many young people there are working there, and it's amazing to be around all that young energy. But it also, no one ever told me to shut up, boomer, but I could I could feel it every now and then. But the thing I really decided to do was, as I transition into my declining years, however you want to sell it, I want to do it with intention. I want to make sure that I don't get blindsided by the age restrictions that come along with the workplace. Like that, you can't it's going to happen. Like that's just, I don't know why that is, especially as an older person, I don't know why it is. I've got literally decades of experience, and I'm an incredibly creative person. I'm a pretty fun guy to hang out with, I think. But yet there will come a time where I won't be able to get a job because I'm too old. And the thing I'm trying to make sure of is that as I'm cross-dissolving into these later years, that I am taking charge of my life in a positive way. 100%. There's an amazing book called oh my gosh, it's I'm going to look it up while you talk. Okay. So I'm going to look it up and we'll put it in the show notes. Okay. But the idea is that as we age, we pass through distinct zones of intelligence. Where you go from in your younger years, where you're very good at iterating and ideating and generating lots of new information, and as you transition into your older years, you become very good at refining and very good at thinking about information in very different ways than you could when you were younger. And I've noticed that in myself 100%. And the challenge in life is to not fight that transition, but to understand that it's coming and to learn and grow with it. And one of the ways you do that is through sharing your information and sharing your knowledge. Everybody can't be a teacher, obviously, but figuring out how to transition into that age where you're much better at at refinement than you are at generation, I think is a really important thing to try and learn how to do.
Yeah, totally. And, Wouter makes a comment, older or too expensive, ... It's a great comment in a way, even though you might be taking the piss a little. I think that the reality is that for people who, or especially creative people who have done it for so long, what I've noticed is, yes, it's more expensive, right? But and part of that is because of what you've taken on in your life. You have a certain number of bills and you have to do that. But part of it is because of your experience and your efficiency. I might be more expensive than I was 20 years ago, but I'm probably 10 times more efficient at getting a product. So I actually get more done in less time. It costs more money, but it actually doesn't, because in the long term, it actually can cost the client less money because you're taking all of that knowledge, which makes you that much more efficient.
Walter, I'm looking up the book right now.
Well, it's $360,000. Where is this coming from? I'm not drinking it. I'm drinking something called Aqua today. Okay, that's Cameron Flask.
Yes,
that's a whole different thing. I gotta give me a break. Well, while you're looking that up, I mean, we don't have a lot. I mean, I don't mind if we go over just a little bit, but one of the things I wanted to make sure. Oh, good. What's it called? And you can put the link into the chat, though. I don't know if it'll be. I don't think it's a hyperlink.
I don't have access. I have access to the guest chat, but I don't have access to the YouTube chat. But I'm gonna pull up the Audible because I have it on Audible. So the book title is called. It's Arthur C. Brooks. He's having kind of a moment right now. If you just type in Arthur C. Brooks, he's got a bunch of YouTube videos and a TED Talk. His title, the book is called From Strength to Strength. And you should read it if you're my age or older. You should also read it if you're younger, because had I understood this when I was in my 30s, that my intelligence and the way I look and analyze the world was changing as I get older, when you say that in a sentence, right, that seems like, oh, duh, of course you're going to change as you get older. But you don't, as you're getting older, you don't realize it. And it would take someone to point it out to you, and you look back and go, wow, had I been in my 30s, had I known that, how I would change and grow over time, I could maybe adapt to it a little bit better. And so if there's younger people on this call, read this book, even if you're not the same age as me and Rick, because it will definitely help. From strength to strength, finding success, happiness, and deep purpose in the second half of life. And shit.
That part's in the title if you want it to be. Yeah, there you go. So so Wouter, you might value your older employees, but I don't think you're from the States, so that's
everybody moved to where Wouter is. You don't live in Oregon, do you, Wouter?
No, and you don't live anywhere in the United States, because in this country people don't respect older people, and that's a shitty thing. But let's talk about something not positive or positive, but just looking forward, and sort of where things are going. It's less about where you see the industry going, though that can be part of it, Rob, but it's where are you interested in things? Like, what is piquing your interest creatively when you start to look at these things, aside from just creating? What areas and what, not trends, but what's kind of getting you interested about things?
Yeah. It's funny. I'm actually kind of going back to basics, which is really solid animation and composition and design and storytelling. Because AI art is having a moment right now. That's the new thing.
For sure.
And it's crazy how fast it's come on, right? Over the last 3 months, we've gone from blurry, fuzzy images to just stunning works of art, in quotation marks, right? And that's kind of the debate right now is this stuff art? Who owns it? What does it mean for artists if an AI can create these stunning works? What do we do as humans? And I come back to I'm just I got early access to midjourney, which is one of the tools.
Yes.
So there's a couple of competing tools.
Yep.
There's DALL-E 2, midjourney, and Stable Diffusion, and there's a couple others. They're all kind of mushing together into this thing called AI art. I got early access to it, and I use it for an hour, half an hour, 45 minutes, and I was like, I felt like I'd been eating sugary cereal for the whole time. Like it didn't, like it wasn't satisfying. Like, right, you know, you get done, that bowl of Lucky Charms tastes good while you're eating it, and then you just feel like shit afterwards, right? And I didn't feel like I was the one creating. And I've had a lot of arguments and with my friends, you know, like Chris Doe and I, when we had a long conversation about this the other day, and my friend Heather Crank, who she actually has an event coming up. If you want to learn about AI art, she has an event. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. It's coming up on, I think it's the 19th, where she's going to be giving essentially a lesson in AI art, the thing that's really interesting about her approach is that she's using AI art as a form of therapy for herself. She doesn't view it as a threat. She views it as something to help inspire her to get back into being more creative, and which is a really unique perspective on it. You know, when I first saw it, I was looking at it as this threat. It was like, God damn it, the robots are coming to take our job, and it's not like something. Yes, the toothpaste is out of the tube, as they say, and we're gonna, you know, AI is coming. The question is, how do we as humanity, how do we as human beings, how do we as a society react to it and adapt to it? And for me, my answer is going to be, I choose to create with intention. I want to create things as a human being, as an artist. That may at some point include AI tools assisting me to do those things. Right now, the image generation, yes, Karen X Chang, 360 grad. Yeah, she's doing some amazing stuff, just incredible work. Google her, and she's just done stunning stuff. And that's the thing. Like, you know, at some point, these tools are going to become a thing that people use to create with intention. Right now, we're in this early phase where it's just type a bunch of words and get a beautiful image, and they're going to evolve and grow and change. And I'm going to 100% pay attention to it and stay on top of it. But the form of the tools right now doesn't really interest me. What does interest me is creating things myself with intention, and whether it's something I shoot myself. I'm on the board of directors for a local land trust, and I try to create video content for them. Whether I'm creating my own personal projects, I want to be the person creating them. When the AI tools are helping me create, then I'm going to jump on them full force, because I'm not a Luddite. I've always been on the technological curve. It's just that the format of the tools right now doesn't really float my boat.
Yeah, totally. And I'm short-circuiting here, Rob, because I switched to a screen share with our split screen, and when I switch back to our 2-up, it resets itself. It's not something I do very often. So I'm like, so what I can do is I can like switch over to something like this, but then I'm like, how do I populate that so that it's you? And so I'm short-circuiting. So that's, you know, at least I'm being honest about it. Yeah.
That's good. I actually saw it happen. I was trying not to get distracted by it. And I was like,
I'm very distracted by it. I'm just going to keep
ranting. I'm going to get on my soapbox and rant for a bit.
Yeah, I love this this tool, Ecamm Live, but it's, you know, it's learning, especially when you're assigning things to a Stream Deck controller, the switchability between things. And I don't generally do a lot of share screen. What I'll do is I'll build a lot of this into the actual show, and so it's in there. So, you know, that's all right. It kind of takes us to the place. Yeah. What do you
Thaddeus brings up a really interesting. I'd love to hear your perspective, Jim, on that. You know, cinematographers using AI to start thinking about how to approach projects, which is really, again, you think about it, the toothpaste being out of the tube, and this is happening and now. How can we use it to be more creative?
Yeah, so for me, what's interesting, Rob and Thaddeus and everybody else, is that it always has to do with what perch or where you are when it comes to how you look at a certain thing. So for me, one of the key areas that I'm really interested in is virtual production. And one of the brick walls, one of the things that really is preventing a lot of people in my industry who have my skill sets from moving forward with it is not just computing power, but it's knowledge of things like Unreal Engine. And how do you build 3D worlds, and how do you do that kind of stuff? And so AI to me is really interesting because from that standpoint, I can say, well, I'm not a 3D artist who creates worlds in Unreal Engine. I don't know how to create those real-time things, and I know that if I wanted to do it on a large scale, Baby Yoda behind your left shoulder, Mandalorian style, it's a huge undertaking for me to do that. So the promise of being able to create a virtual world that I can tie real production into and do that, which will happen at some point, is actually really exciting to me. But then I also look at it from the standpoint of the creatives, and Chris Do is a great person to think about. I'm going to you, not to just so that I'm switching up the image here, but Chris Do is is a really interesting person because he is a graphic designer and a designer and a creative person, and he's embracing AI. He's embracing midjourney. He's embracing these tools. But what he's doing is he's saying it's another tool in the toolbox. It's going to happen anyway. How do I integrate it in what I do? And how do I take all my knowledge as a creative person and use this as an additional tool, as opposed to having the viewpoint that it's going to replace me? And it's a big conversation that's just starting, but I'm excited about it, but I'm also terrified.
It really is a generational shift that we're witnessing right now. Just like the generational shift that happened. It's funny, one of the things that Chris and I were talking about was, I came into the desktop publishing world right at the transition from film into linotype machines, right? And so people were setting things with lead type, and then we had then they were shooting things on cameras and setting type that way, and then all of a sudden this thing called the linotype happened, and then all of a sudden we went right into desktop, true desktop publishing, where you could set all of your entire layout in a computer. The people that were fully engaged in the analog world, they fell into two camps: those that made the shift into digital media and those that got left behind. And the question becomes, in this new transition that we're experiencing now, how do you respond to it? And it's going to happen, whether you can't bury your head in the sand about it, but you have to approach it with intention. Again, that word is so important. Is how do you intend to live your life? For me, my intention is to live creatively. If that ends up including AI in that creativity, then yes, I will embrace it wholeheartedly. Creativity in its current form, AI in its current form isn't that thing. What I was, nobody should ever have to rotoscope again. Like, that is not a thing that anybody should ever have to do. Tracking.
100%.
Nobody should ever have to track anything ever again. And we were promised that AI would help us do all those things. Instead, we bypassed all that shit, and we went right to beautiful image creation. And we still haven't had the AI tool assistance. Where's my robot rotoscoping assistant? I want that. Right. Those are the kinds of tools. Like, I want to be like, let's employ AI to do the things that humans really shouldn't have to do. And coming back to Thaddeus's comment about cinematographers, like, as a form of inspiration, it is absolutely incredible. Like, the number of ideations you can go through in a very short amount of time on a subject inside of an AI engine is staggering. And if there's it's shocking, really, how much you can generate in a very short amount of time, which of course could lead to analysis paralysis, right? If as a creative person, you would never show all that stuff to the client, right? Because they would, but yet at some point you have to learn how to curate all that information. And, that may be the next iteration of creativity for people, as we get into this more curatorial phase where we're deciding what style becomes, and then eventually AIs will start doing that for us. I sure hope not.
Yeah. All right, I think I have a solution so we can get a 2 up again. It's going to be a little messy because we're going to flip our roles, I think, but I might screw this up. So,
or it just ends the call.
I like screwing things up sometimes, though. Yeah, it could end the call, but I'm willing to take a chance here. Is this it? I think so. Boom. Okay, so now I'm on the other side.
I'm on the other side now. Nice.
Yeah, that's what I said. It might screw people up a little bit. It's more interesting this way. You got to take a little chance in life, and it's another learning for me. Getting into using technology in real time, which for me is also another thing. But I absolutely agree with everything that you're saying, Rob. And nobody wants the client standing over your shoulder unless you're making a feature film and it's a director in an editorial sense, and you don't really want that. And part of being a creative person is having space and time to be creative. Mm-hmm. And I never enjoyed I used to have to do stuff where I would Apple would send me into like news environments, and we would have to essentially shadow what they were using smoke or flame for, and they were trying to do it with Final Cut Studio. And just being in that environment, like, I lost years of my life in days, because it's not the type of environment that I want to be in, and I want to do things. So it will be interesting. They always talk about futurists and people who look forward in terms of technological advancement, that we ain't seen nothing yet. The last 20 years is nothing. We're going to see jumps in months, definitely years, but in months soon, which will seem like the jumps that we were making in decades. It's just going to get really crazy right now, and you're either going to have to say, I'm packing it in, or you're going to have to find that part on that highway that's your lane, and you're going to get in it, and you're going to ride. You're going to go for the ride, and because it's going to be really, really crazy, I think, but exciting.
And the challenge, it'll be exciting as long. The challenge is when you get in your lane to not look down, to keep looking up. Like that's the hard part. It'd be really easy to find a groove, get stuck in there, and then have the world pass you by, and have all of these technological advances happen around you without you being an active participant in them. And that's the key. It's
it's all part. It's all planned.
Are you talking like is that the gray hair and a round bald head, or?
It's planned this way, and us switching also. It's all part of the AI conversation, and
exactly
what's going on here.
Beep, boop, 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 beep, boop, boop.
Yeah, it's crazy. Amazing. There's so many more things that we can talk about. I'd love to have you on camera and Flask at some point. We can break open some whiskey, and you can come hang out with.
You know what? I'll make the trip over the hill for that one.
Okay, good. Yeah.
For context, folks, Jim and I only live about maybe 3 hours apart or so. So at some point we could get together in person.
Yeah, we can do it in person, but there's also a fourth box in Cameron Flask. It's a logo, so you can always come in and just be the fourth box and hang out over there with Caleb and it'll be good. But listen, I would love to keep this conversation going. I think there's so much more. We've just started to scratch the surface in terms of where things are going creatively. I think we're in a similar place in terms of figuring out where we want our lane to be as creative people. I think we both know that education is part of it. I can't get away from that no matter what. And then it's how do we start to figure out what part of these tools we want to use. And at least I don't know how to pronounce your name. In the US that would be Lies, but it's Lees maybe? Lees?
Yeah.
Lees. There's no sorry
Welcome,
needed.
Lise.
It's great. It's even funnier when we get comments like that. And Slavic, you coming in here like after time is over already, and you have a snide comment. Okay, you already left Oregon.
well
Slavic.
Played, by the way.
Yeah, well played. But Slavic and I, you're killing me, kid. So almost 10 past the hour, Rob. I really appreciate it. Let's do it again. And
I'm grateful for the time. And thank you, everyone, for sticking around through my ramblings. I appreciate it.
Not ramblings. All right. All the best, everybody. See you next time. 2 weeks from now. Bye. No episode next week because I'm on the dock. Take care. Bye.